Hello everyone, my name is Allie Lawson. I'm a graduate student in DHN 580 and this is my evidence-based practice and research project oral presentation. So some background on the problem that I chose, physical activity effect on adolescents' academic performance. So we know that physical activity is crucial for the mental health, the all-around health and well-being for individuals, and individuals include both adolescents and adults. According to the World Health Organization, the recommendation is 60 minutes per day of moderate to vigorous activity for adolescents. And to clarify, adolescents here is 5-year-olds to 17-year-old individuals. So we are seeing today that more and more adolescents are sedentary or enduring physical inactivity, especially compared to generations before. And from seeing this, we're seeing those intermediate the kind of immediate negative effects, but more so we're seeing those long-term negative effects from physical inactivity, and those include those non-communicable diseases such as obesity, type 2 diabetes, cancer, hypertension, and other non-communicable diseases that lead to a lessened quality of life or even mortality. In addition to immediate health benefits of physical activity, regular physical activity during adolescence has long-term implications for learning, cognitive development, and future career opportunities. So physical activity does not just focus on that kind of physical health and well-being, it also comes full circle in affecting other things in life. So kind of going back to the social determinants of health, it can affect an array of things. Efforts to promote physical activity among adolescents include creating supportive environments in schools, implementing policies and prioritizing physical activity, and educating parents and children, and kind of that support system of physical activity benefits. And of course, encouraging a wider acceptance of physical activity beyond organized sports or extracurricular. We want this to be lifelong, not just in school. So it's really important we address the barriers for adolescents to participate in more physical activity. We want them to understand the importance of physical activity. We want to equip them with strategies and equip them with just that education that helps promote healthy behavior and long-term health improvement outcomes. And this is for adolescents worldwide. So we will go ahead and move on. Transitioning from the background to the PICO question. My PICO question for population in adolescence intervention is the evidence to suggest 60 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity daily comparison compared to sedentary activity, an outcome will result in higher academic achievement among this population. So in adolescence, is there evidence to suggest 60 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity daily compared to sedentary activity will result in higher academic achievement among this population? I did complete 3 quality criteria checklists, and here are the citations for those. The quality criteria checklist I will be breaking down for you today is the first one. Apologies if you may not be able to see that. I will go over the what was done, how it was done, and the conclusion. So what was done in this article, this is a systematic review and meta-analysis. This review had 2 researchers that search databases separately to prevent bias, and they ended up with 36 articles that were pulled from the systematic databases. and those 36 were systematically reviewed prior to pulling them from the database. The aim of this systematic review and meta-analysis was to address physical activity intervention effects on children's cognition and metacognition, and to also determine which physical activity interventions characteristics are most favorable for increasing cognition and metacognition in adolescents. So in this very large systematic review, a total of 5,527 adolescents from age 4 to 14 were included in this review. So all interventions that were included included that amount of children and the ages 4 to 14. The timing of measurements for the physical activity interventions, this was around school time. So this was during the hours of 8 a.m. and this also included after school time, so 8 a.m. to around 5 p.m. for extracurricular activities. The interventions were aimed at increasing physical activity enrichment for adolescents. Overall, all interventions led to an increase in physical activity duration, and the increase in physical activity duration correlated with an improved cognitive function in adolescents who participated in the intervention. To clarify, the name of this systematic review is the effect of physical activity interventions on children's cognition and metacognition, a systematic review and meta-analysis. That is for this quality criteria checklist. As far as my comments as the reviewer, this was a very large systematic review and meta-analysis. The evidence shown is in good practice guidelines, and education and public health may counteract some of the things that we are seeing in schools, such as that physical activity reduction. This is a good transition here. This is for the evidence summary for my first quality criteria checklist, which we just went over. So the evidence summary for that, this was a very large systematic review and meta-analysis, and the objective here was twofold, meaning that the first thing they wanted to focus on was to assess the effect of physical activity interventions on children and adolescents' cognition and metacognition, and then secondly, to determine the characteristics of individuals and physical activity programs that enhance the development of cognition and metacognition functions. So two things: they want to see how it actually affected it, and they wanted to see which best strategies could lead to being a little bit more strategic in affecting that cognition and metacognition. And you'll see later how this will help with my research design. So for this one, there were two different researchers that blindly searched the databases for those 36 articles that were pulled. This prevented bias, and the conclusion out of those total 36 studies that were pulled, physical activity benefits several domains of cognition and metacognition in youth, and curricular activity, physical education interventions, and programs aimed at increasing daily physical activity seem to be the most effective. For my second quality criteria checklist, evidence summary, this quality criteria checklist was for physical activity behaviors in adolescents and current evidence and opportunities for intervention by Lancet 2021. This was a large umbrella review. It included 13 systematic reviews that were identified. In this review, it was focusing on three key components for adolescents and regarding physical activity, and what that system needs This includes supportive schools, the social and digital environment, and the multi-purpose urban environments. And unfortunately, despite the increasing volume of research that's being done on adolescents regarding physical activity, there are still several gaps, and some of those gaps include physical activity surveillance and intervention implementation. So those physical activity interventions that need to be implemented into schools or where adolescents are at, and of course changing the policy that can affect that physical activity. So changing that policy to where adolescents will actually be made to do physical activity or highly encouraged to do it. In this review, it concluded that for adolescents, and for adolescents here, it was aged individuals 10 years to 24 years old, and it concluded that schools fit best for physical activity intervention for adolescents. But it was shedding a light on how adolescents that are not in schools are missing out on those opportunities for physical activity. For my third and final quality criteria checklist, the article I chose is the long-term trends of participation in physical activity during adolescence with educational ambition and attainment. In this study, this was a very large and long longitudinal study, a national longitudinal study of adolescent health to determine if physical activity during adolescence leads to long-term educational attainment. I found this study incredibly interesting. They had a total of 15,000 participants over the course of 1995 to 2008. But the interesting thing was they tried to stick with that same group of adolescents they started with in 1995. So in 1995, the first wave was for 12-year-olds to 19 years of age. And then they ended with kind of that same people in 2008 who would have been 24 to 32 years of age. So I thought that was very interesting. So during the study, they remained those same 3 research questions. And this was first, do physical activity levels in adolescents contribute to continued or increased age variable and increased physical activity levels in later adolescence and young adulthood? Second, do physical activity levels in adolescence relate to levels of educational ambition? And third, do physical activity levels in adolescence relate to the levels of educational attainment by young adulthood? For the first research question, there was a small positive correlation that indicated that adolescents who reported at least some physical activity initially experienced slightly more growth in the amount of physical activity reported over the course of the study than those who reported no physical activity initially. So that physical activity choice to complete physical activity did go up. For the second research question, there was a small positive correlation between physical activity and the desire to attend college, which was statistically significant. And the answer to the outcome of the third research question, it was determined through ordinal linear regression that reporting CDC recommended levels of physical activity during wave 1 was associated with high levels of completed higher education by both waves 3 and 4. The association was stronger during wave 3 than it was during wave 4. My overall evidence summary from the 3 articles chosen was, with recent decline in physical activity among adolescents and significant negative side effects as a result, such as those non-communicable diseases that I was discussing earlier, physical activity interventions are most needed. So we know that physical activity interventions are highly needed, and evidence shows that they are best performed in school settings using actual physical activity intervention curriculum. Physical activity interventions raise cognitive and physical activity performance in adolescents, as well as cognition and metacognition in adolescents. This poses a correlation between increased academic performance among adolescents who participate in 60 minutes of physical activity daily or in physical activity daily. The increase in academic performance could correlate with higher career attainment, and further studies regarding physical activity interventions in adolescents into adulthood need to continue to provide more evidence for this correlation. So this leads to my research question, which is, can daily 60-minute physical activity intervention curriculum in school lead to an increase in adolescent academic performance? So that is a total of 60 minutes. And then, of course, my alternate hypothesis was, can daily 60-minute physical activity intervention curriculum in school lead to decrease in adolescent academic performance? So before I jump into the breakdown, here is just a little kind of quick example of what you're about to see. So my design was random control trial of the sample, including 800 adolescent students, and the age range is 8 to 18 years of age. The intervention is 60 minutes of physical activity for 18 weeks, and the measurable outcome is, of course, academic performance. And I'm getting ready to break that all down and show you how that will be done, but that is just the at a glance look of what I would like to do. For my research design, I also am going to combine this and describe the intervention as well. This will be a random control trial. This study will include a collaborative effort between Menifee County High School, Menifee County Middle School, and the Menifee County Cooperative Extension Service in Eastern Kentucky. Menifee County Cooperative Extension offers evidence-based education such as nutrition education, health classes, nutrition classes, 4-H youth development, and other evidence-based practice curriculum that comes from the University of Kentucky. And of course, the middle school and high school will have the students. The intervention itself will consist of physical activity education classes and 60 minutes of physical activity of choice daily for all Menifee County adolescent students ages 8 to 18. This is in an effort to increase physical activity for Menifee County adolescents. The effort also would like to show later, and we'll look at that later on academic performance for Menifee County adolescent students. Not to get ahead, the research team for this intervention will be collaborating with Menifee County 4-H Family Consumer Science Agent, the Menifee County Middle School Physical Education Teacher, as well as the Menifee County High School Physical Education Teacher, the Menifee County SNAP Ed and NEP Assistant, one personal trainer, and the Menifee County Cooperative Extension will provide expertise in health programming for youth. Menifee County physical education teachers will provide behavioral oversight of the students, and the personal trainer will provide additional education such as safety and form for adolescent students on what physical activity precautions need to be taken. As of currently, at Menifee County School District, it is required to take physical education classes for only one semester. So out of the total of 36 weeks, 18 weeks will be what half of the students will have in the intervention. So out of the 36 weeks, those students do not get a total of 36 weeks of physical activity education. They will only get 18 weeks. So using that one semester, 18 weeks, half the adolescents will be seen in the spring semester and half in the fall semester. And again, that will total for 400 students per semester, but a total of 800 students. Recruitment For this intervention, we'll first begin with requesting permission from the Menifee County School Board of Education, and of course getting permission from the parents and children in Menifee County age 8 to 18. Permission sheets will be sent home with beginning of the year school paperwork to allow what students will be able to participate in the study. And once permission sheets are obtained, the inclusion criteria will be Menifee County adolescents age 8 to 18 years old, and exclusion criteria includes adults or children under 8 years of age. For qualitative measure, adolescents will be assessed on their daily physical activity output and academic performance prior to the intervention and post-intervention. They will be using, the materials being used will be physical activity questionnaires and assessing the student database for grades. The physical activity questionnaire is retrieved from the Kentucky 4-H health curriculum. Materials required will be a pencil and a pre and post paper questionnaire. So samples will be taken at the beginning of the semester and at the end of the semester. And I mentioned accessing the student database for grades. Grades will be assessed at the beginning of the semester and at the end of the semester to see if change was made. Also, grades will be compared with the first control group, which is the fall semester of kiddos. So there'll be 400 adolescents, and compared, those 400 adolescents will be in the physical activity intervention, actually doing 60 minutes of physical activity per day, compared with the sedentary group, which during those other 400 kids will not be completing in physical activity. So those will be compared as well. For quantitative measures, at the end of each physical activity intervention, there will be an incentive for Menifee County adolescents that participated in the 60 minutes of daily physical activity in the gym class for 18 weeks. There will be an Excel spreadsheet to record which students participated in the 60 minutes of physical activity. Of course, you cannot force children to participate in physical activity or for 60 minutes. That is why that spreadsheet is there, to actually see which students participated in the 60 minutes of physical activity. This way, researchers know which students to compare when it comes to physical activity and comparing their academic performance pre and post intervention. Equivalency tests will be given to the students every 4 weeks and graded to see if improvements are already being made in a shorter term. All questions will be the same for all students, and the questions will change every 4 weeks. For the statistical analysis, the quantitative analysis, the pre and post intervention questionnaire is to identify where Menifee County adolescent students started and to see if improvements in academic performance was made after completing the 18 weeks of the 60 minutes per day of physical activity. Pre and post surveys will also measure the impact of the physical education component aside from the actual physical activity. So we want to see if physical education benefits, like if the students actually learn the material. The equivalency test will also allow for another perspective to be shown for improvement. The research approach used in this study is experimental, as it aims to look at outcomes from manipulating the control variables and independent variable, which is physical activity duration. The software used to decipher this data is the MAXQDA. This has several options to input the data and also see trends that arise from the data that will be imported into it. The primary dependent variable, of course, is academic performance, and the independent variable is physical activity. Lastly, for statistical analysis, the qualitative analysis, the pre and post surveys will allow researchers to understand what activities can be implemented for enjoyment of adolescents and encourage them to do outside of sports and extracurricular activities. And these recommendations can be used in other settings outside of schools for adolescents. So this was a random control trial, and the data will be arranged according to first semester and second semester, so fall semester and spring semester. And this physical activity intervention will allow us to compare academic performance and compare what activities students enjoyed best. We have made it to the end. Here are the references used for my project. Thank you so much for your time and attention.